Hey guys, it's Marissa from Imagine This, and today we are going to be going over Art 3's lesson for the week, and we are going to be doing some watercolor trees. Art 3 is our most advanced class, but we welcome anyone to join in. Materials for today, you will be needing a watercolor set and a paintbrush. I chose to use a really thin, round paintbrush, but whatever works for you. You're also going to need some watercolor paper or some cardstock, paper towel or a towel to wipe off your brush, and some water. Alright, let's get started.
Hi guys, this is Brittany. I'm narrating over Marissa's video just because of that beeping sound. It happens throughout half of this video and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I will narrate as Marissa creates beautiful artwork. Okay, now there are several different ways to do trees, but Marissa has come up with this really nice and fluid technique that is very abstract and beautiful. So what you want to do is called the wet on wet technique, in which you place a lot of water onto your page, not too much, but a decent puddle onto your page, and then you're going to add some color into it. Now she's putting a lot of water on there to make sure that it really absorbs the pigment whenever she picks it up. And you want it to be a general sort of fluffy shape. Again, this is a more abstract way of doing a tree, but it still turns out gorgeous. And she is choosing some fall colors, some lovely oranges, yellows, and reds. Now watch as she applies it to the water and how it spreads, creating sort of this beautiful flowery blooming effect. And make sure to clean your brush each time you dip into a new color. Alright, now back to Marissa's lovely voice and instructions. Take it away, Marissa.
Alright, so I just finished up doing this watercolory, really runny, abstract top autumn half of our tree. So now we actually have to wait until this is completely dry. So to help do that, you're welcome to dab it with your towel or your paper towel, but that is going to pick up a lot of the color. So for now, I'm just going to leave this here and I'm going to move on to the next tree and we'll come back and finish this in a moment, okay? But it's really, really important that we wait for it to completely dry. Alright, so the next tree I'm going to show you is a little bit more realistic. We're going to have some nice green tones and some yellow tones in it. Nice summery tree. And so remember with watercolor that we always want to start with the lightest color first, so with the highlights. So I'm going to pick this really nice light yellow green here for the highlights. And when I go in, please don't feel like you have to draw every single little leaf. I don't know any artist that does that. I know there are some out there, but that is just very, very time consuming. You can get a really similar effect of the leaves just by leaving some white space, doing really quick movements like this. So I'm imagining the tree. Of course, you are more than welcome to draw out the tree beforehand. I'm not going to do so. So you can see that by using the wet on dry technique, we get a little bit more control. It's not as runny, it's not as abstract, but I'm just going to pick a couple of places where I want the highlights to be on this tree. So I can imagine maybe where the sun is hitting it, maybe where my angle is, where I'm looking at the tree. You can see I'm leaving these white spaces. Those can either be filled in later with the darker colors, or they can be left as the light shining through the leaves. Alright, so once I'm happy with the highlights that I have, I'm going to go in with another bit of a darker green. You can even use the same green that you were using, just using less water and more pigment to make it just a little bit of a darker color in here. Luckily, since we're using the wet on dry technique, it doesn't take quite as long to dry. I'm going to go in with an even darker green. If you do decide that you want to mix some colors, if you're borrowing a palette from us, you can use this up here as your mixing spot. If not, you can get out just another little piece of plastic. But I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker green over here. I can use these greens too, but I think I'm going to start with an in-between. So I can choose to do a little bit of black to mix it in. I'm going to use this little bit of dark gray here, just until I'm happy with that color. Okay, and then I can go in, I don't want to cover up all my highlights. because I want there to be some of these highlights shining through, but maybe I'll go in and I'll add in some more of these shadows. Again, I'm using these really quick, kind of going back and forth, quick motions. Okay, so I'm just going to take a second and I'm going to fill in some of these darker areas. Alright, so I've added in some of these darker leaves in here, and again, I'm still leaving some of these places for the nice highlights to come through. So I'm going to go in, and we want to do a little bit of shadow, but we want to be really, really careful that we don't overwhelm this. So I'm going to pick this dark gray color instead of black. You're welcome to experiment with black as well, but we just want to be really, really careful. See how overpowering that is? So we just want to be careful and not using it in too many places. Then if it gets too dark, just picking up some water and blending it in a little bit. But there are shadows, not just at the bottom, in the different clumps. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add in some shadows here. Again, I'm just keeping that same motion. And it's really nice with watercolor to leave in these negative spaces because it gives the viewer a little way to interact with the tree. And it also just, again, gives that illusion that light is shining through. Okay, so now that we have this, we are going to go in with some browns. We can do some highlights and some dark spots on the browns for the tree trunk. So I'm going to start with this light brown here. It's going to be a little baby tree that's still growing. We've got some branches that are coming up. I'm also going to go in with maybe a darker brown or even a black just to give one or two shadows on the sides of the tree, which might not show up quite as well in the video. And then as soon as I make sure that up here is dry, it's pretty dry right now, luckily, since we were doing the wet on dry technique. Could even be nice to go in and add in a little bit of branches, just seen through the trees once in a while. I want to keep this looking pretty natural, so nothing too crazy. We're just kind of imagining maybe where the branches would go, where they would spread off. I'm just leaving those little hints in here. So as I was saying earlier, this tree kind of turned out to be a little bit of a baby tree, so growing here at the top with just little really thin trunks. But you can experiment with making it thicker, with making the leaves come down more, and playing around with there. But there is another way to do a tree. So now that this is completely dry, we're actually going to come back to this abstract tree. And we're going to do a really similar thing. We're going to add in a trunk. Okay, I'm just going to make sure this is really dry here. Perfect. And this time I'm going to use less water and I'm going to use more pigment here. So I want to keep with this theme of this tree being pretty abstract. So I'm just going to go right on top of it instead of this really particular just showing throughout the tree. I'm just going to have the branch be completely right on top of the tree. Again, just remember that obviously trunks are thicker at the bottom and they get thinner as the branches go out, so you can press harder with your brush and then lift up a little bit. And then some little branches. And there we have our abstract fall tree and our realistic tree. Alright, I'm going to show you guys just one more technique really quickly. We're going to be doing layered pine trees. Okay, so we're going to do this illusion of pine trees layered up on each other, and so the ones further away, depending on where the light source is, are going to be a little bit lighter, and then the ones in front are going to be a little bit darker. The reason why we're doing lighter to darker is because of watercolor. Of course, we can't layer on lighter colors on top of the darker colors. So we are going to start and we are going to pick, I'm going to pick an actual dark tone, but I'm going to use enough water so that it shows up lightly. So I'm going to start with this color here. There's quite a bit of water. I'm just going to start by drawing some lines here in the back to represent our trees. And then doing a pine tree is really similar to how we were doing trees before. Just really quick motions, but this time we're going to be going left to right. So I'm just going to take a second and I am going to fill in all of these pine trees. Shaking, going left and right. Again, we want to use a decent amount of water. We don't want it to run anywhere, but we want it to be light enough that we can cover it up later. Okay, so I just finished these faraway trees. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that these are completely dry. These, if you want to pick up with your towel, I think it's fine because they're going to be so far in the background anyway that it might help with having that little bit of a glowing look. So now I'm going to pick a color. It can be the same color, it just needs to be a little bit darker and using less water. And I'm actually going to do the same thing. I'm going to off-center these next trees though. These ones are just going to be a little bit closer. Okay, so I'm just going to take a second and I'm going to fill in these trees the same way. And again, we want to keep that just a little bit darker than the ones back here so that we can bring them forward. So now I have the second layer here. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to blot it a little bit, picking up some of the color as well as just making sure that it's dry for our third and final layer. And then I'm going to go in doing the same thing with the darkest color. I'm actually going to create a new color with this green here, mix in with this dark gray. Again, we just want to make sure that we're using a lot of pigment. We really want this third layer to pop out in front of the second layer. Okay, so I'm going to take a second and just finish up this front layer really quick. So I'm just finishing up this first layer here in this tree. You can see that we have this nice gradient here of our trees that are furthest away, a little bit closer, and then the trees right in front of us. So I'm going to leave these first ones unblotted so that we can have all that color that we possibly can just really soak in there. So that is it for our Art 2 lesson. We've given you these 3 different examples of painting trees. And so now we want you to try these yourself and then also come up with some new ways and some different trees for yourself to work on. Okay, have fun.